welcome to a behind-the-scenes look at maker culture. I'm your host, Curtis File. In early September, 45 journalism students between Ryerson and the University of Western Ontario got together and started working on a 9-part series about maker culture. That's everyone from chefs and artists to web hackers and engineers who grab the do-it-yourself ethic and change our world in the process. One of the most exciting aspects of our project was getting to hit the road to get footage of the many makers we had learned about in class. The Fabricators group at Western took a road trip to Cleveland, and on the way they stopped in Detroit at the Heidelberg Project. I caught up with Jeff Turner to talk about it.
It's a couple of blocks in a really rough part of downtown Detroit, a residential area that's definitely seen better days. And a fellow by the name of Tyree Guyton in the mid-'80s took it upon himself to sort of transform the neighborhood into a living art project. And he did this with very little means, lots of volunteer help from kids in the neighborhood. Even his grandpa was a big help for many years. And so he just sort of let his imagination run wild in true maker fashion. He painted houses with polka dots. He salvaged whatever he could, whether it's empty liquor bottles that he assembles into some sort of wild collage, or dead shopping carts that he mounted in the top of a tree and hung teddy bears from. Some of it's very bizarre, but the total effect of, just like you say, it's almost surreal. You come out of a neighborhood in Detroit that looks like it's been bombed, and all of a sudden you're in this kind of goofy wonderland. And I think it was, yeah, it's you sort of have to see it to believe it.
As we began to reach out to different groups, we discovered that maker culture had a long past. Some of it was right in our own backyard. I talked with Anna Delaney about the makers she met on the road as she searched for maker culture history.
We went to St. Jacob's, which is an hour and maybe 15 minutes outside of London. It's by Kitchener-Waterloo. We went there on Halloween, and we all woke up at 5 in the morning. James, I think, picked me up. I was the last one to get picked up at 6 a.m., so we were on the road around 6. He had to drive, which was too bad for him. And we got there around 7:15. It was still dark, and it was not quite open yet, so we had lots of time to kind of get settled. And then we spoke to a lot of vendors who make their own food and started their own business that way. We spoke to a painter who cuts off cancerous parts of wood and makes coffee tables and art for himself, and he sells them, and so he paints wolves and lots of wildlife on them. We spoke to a jewelry maker, a knitter. We went to the Lego store for the entertainment section, and we probably got home around 3 o'clock, so we were there for most of the day, and we met a lot of people, a lot of makers, and it was really good.
What was the most interesting thing you came across?
I think, well, the most interesting, I would say, is probably the different people who make their own things. And actually, I mean, it's a farmer's market, so they are there to sell and make money. But for so many people we spoke to, like, use their own things that they make. Like, we met a jewelry maker who only wears her own jewelry, pretty much. The painter hangs his own paintings in his home, and most of the food people, like, they eat their own food as well. The most fun part, I would say, would be the Lego place, where we got to see, like, little kids building stuff, which is kind of like the future of makers. And it was nice, and we saw, you know, a lot of Mennonites, and we went to see this old antique store where they actually make brooms, so that was really cool. We actually got to see them make brooms, and they're the last broom makers in Canada, so that was pretty interesting. And yeah, it was really good.
Although our road trips were exciting, not everybody we wanted to hear from could be reached in person. I talked to Carrie Simmons about the long-distance phone calls she had to make to learn about maker science.
Unfortunately, we haven't done a lot of fun road trips or getting anybody into the studio because a lot of our people are really far away. We've talked to a lot of people in California, We've talked to a couple in the UK, and we've also talked to someone in the Netherlands. So part of our problem has been, we don't get to have any of those fun, like, let's go on a road trip adventures, because it's all really far away. So a lot of the stuff we've been doing has been via Skype or the phone.
So do you think, as the project unfolded, many students began to embrace the makerculture movement? For some, that meant baking extravagant cakes. For others, crafting Halloween costumes. Some even made their own makerculture events. Adam Vrenkel over at Ryerson organized a latte art competition. Here's some clips.
Coffee black, coffee hot, in a cup or in a pot. Bring it out, just try not to spill it. Bring it to my face, down my gullet.
Our project wasn't just about the excitement of maker events and road trips. We were also learning about a new kind of journalism. I talked with a few students from Western who told me what they had learned during the process.
The biggest thing that I've noticed for journalism is that we have a power as journalists making these connections with people, interviewing them, to actually bring together some, like maybe maker culture as a unit didn't exist in the same form as it will when we're done. There was hackers, there was food artists, there was all these different people, but maybe they didn't know about each other. Maybe they didn't know that they all tied in together somehow. So as journalists, we actually have a power to create society almost in the same way that we have to report on it. So by bringing all these people together, maybe we're actually making part of this movement that otherwise wouldn't have existed. So it's a really interesting thing to think about for journalism as a career maybe, where you're not just reporting on or sharing something that's happening with the public, we're actually, in a sense, making some of it too.
Most of the time when journalists have a really big story, they keep it under wraps and they don't tell anyone and they work on it in secret, and then it's like this big ordeal when it comes out. But we've been talking about it and getting people interested right from day one, even when we were learning about what it was. So I think that that's kind of a new way to approach journalism, where you share your story right from the beginning, even before it's done. And I think that I really like that aspect.
I think that I now have a term for something that I already kind of understood and was a little bit involved in. Outside of the science-specific aspect, I like to make my own food. I have done some clothing modifications and stuff, and a lot of the people I know are very involved in creating their own art, creating some of their own furniture and stuff like that even. So it's this really interesting culture that I never saw as a culture until I was involved in this class. And I think that through journalism, we're exploring this culture and the different aspects of it and why it's important, that whole community of sharing. And journalism, by its very nature, is about sharing. So I think that we're sharing about sharing right now, so we're making the maker culture ourselves.
Well, it's been interesting because it's not, I think our relationship with our subject has been a little different than might be more typical in news journalism, in that I think there's a degree to which we're making the story happen. We're participants in it. I know the EduPunk group, for example, they, rather than wait around for a conference to happen, they helped get these people together and help coordinate a conference of people, of like-minded people around the theme of EduPunk. And I think, we've done that in our group to a certain extent too, in that Christian spent some time trying to figure out the 3D modeling technology, drew up a simple part. We took the file with us to Michigan and got the guys to print out his part on a RepRap machine. So there's, in a way, we're sort of becoming a part of the project that we're covering. And that's kind of interesting. And I know that, depending on the story, that could get a little foggy in journalism. But I think in this case, it's making for some more interesting storytelling.
Well, that's it for this behind-the-scenes look at maker culture, taking things into our own hands. You can learn more about the project by visiting makingmakers.posterous.com or visiting rabble.ca or thetyee.ca this January, when it will be published. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's your world. What are you going to make of it?